All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let me just tell you, it's been a day. So, I got my starter out of the fridge this morning, planning to make some crusty loaves of bread this weekend. And if I knew this morning how I feel now, I would never have taken this out because I don't feel like doing this. But since it's been out all day, it needs to get fed. So, luckily, today is the easy part. All we have to do is feed the starter today to get it ready for the recipe. So I've got all the equipment I need out. I'm going to show you how to feed the starter. It is Friday. It's about 7:40 in the evening. And so we are going to make 2 loaves of crusty bread this weekend. In my previous video, we made sandwich bread, and we are going to follow a similar path. So tonight we are going to feed the starter. Tomorrow we are going to mix everything together. And then 2 days later, which would be, today's Friday, that would be Saturday. So Monday we'll bake the bread, hopefully. So what we are going to do today is we're going to feed our little starter. We're going to make it into our bigger starter. And it's going to be the same idea as the last video. So for this video, you can see all my little notes on this that I have worked on. This is the original recipe that I got from Basil and Bloom and that I've kind of tweaked and worked with. It's on his, I think you can get it on his website or his Instagram or whatever, but it's free and he's a great resource to follow as far as maintaining a smaller starter as well. So he's what I've been following along the whole time. So in order to make this recipe, we are looking for 255 grams of starter. So remember, this is probably about 35. I forgot to get a jar out, so hold on. And let me just get a blank glass jar out of the cupboard. And if you see, maybe you can't see it in the video, but my house is a mess too. So we won't, this is real life, guys. So let me turn my scale on. We are going to make sure this is on 0 and on grams. So we got the weight of the jar. Right now there's 35 grams of starter in my jar. What we talked about before is we want to keep 5 grams in here. We're going to feed that and keep going. So we're going to take 30 grams out and put it in our large jar. So we're going to make sure the scale is set back to 0 with that on it. And we're going to take 30 grams and scoop it out of here. And let me actually just show you. That's just how, if you weren't here with me during my last video, that is how my starter looks. It's stiff, it's very thick, and it's only a little bit. And you can make 255 grams right from this. So make sure we're at 0. And we're just going to put a big portion of this in here. So that says we're at 25. So we need to get about 5 more grams out of here. It says it's 31, so we're just going to take a teeny tiny bit, and that's going to be good enough. All right. So this is going to be 5 grams that's left in this jar. And as I've said before, I use this jar over and over again. You can see it's kind of got a lot of stuff on the edges there. It doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, go ahead and use a clean jar. And I'm just using my Vitamix spatula since it's a little firmer and it's got the narrow head. And I use a chopstick as well for this process. So I'm going to put that to the side. And let's feed our small starter first. So we're going to put that back on the scale. Open my flour. Actually, that's at 0. So it does say 5 grams on my scale here. So that's what's in this jar right now. We're going to tare it to 0. And like I said in the past, 5 grams in the jar. I'm going to put 12 grams of water in there and 20 grams of flour. This will make my stiff starter. Right now, I'm just using all-purpose flour for both my feed, and I'm going to feed my the amount for my recipe, all-purpose flour. You can feed it bread flour at this point, or if your recipe says you want to feed it the bread flour, you can do that at this point as well. It's just I never do, and I've never noticed a problem with it. So I'm not changing now. So let's measure out 12 grams. Okay, close enough. It's hovering between 12 and 13, which is fine. Going to reset it to 0, and we're going to scoop out 20 grams. All right, perfect. That's right at 20. So we've got the flour and the water and the little bit of starter in there. And all we're going to do is just get this mixed up while I make a mess. And you're looking for really thick consistency. It's not runny at all. All right. Let's use a chopstick to get all the excess off here and see what we've got. All right, that's good enough for me. You can see in here, there's my thick starter. It's just a ball. And I'm going to just place my jar lid right on it. This is going to sit out on my counter overnight. So it'll rise. It won't be like a liquid starter and look like that, but it will get bigger and fluffier and double in size overnight. And then once this is done rising in the morning, I'll go ahead and put this back in the fridge because I'm done baking with it for now. If I were going to bake more, I would leave it out and I'd feed it again and turn it into the bigger starter for the recipe, but we don't need to do that this time around. So that'll go out of the way. Now we've got our big jar here. So I said we took 30 grams out of here, so that's what's in there right now. I need 255 grams. So since I'm recording this video on my phone, I have broken out a real calculator instead of using my phone. So if we take 255 grams, we're going to take out 30 grams that are already in there. So I need equal amounts of flour and water. So we're going to divide 225 divided by 2. So I need about 113 grams each. So when we are feeding the starter for the recipe, we do not want a stiff starter at that point. We are using a 1-to-1 ratio, I guess, of just flour and water. It's not a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, which would use the same amount of starter, flour, and water. The more starter you use, the quicker it's going to rise. Since I want mine to rise overnight, so I need at least 8 to 10 hours before I'm ready to use this. That's why I use less starter in mine. So if you've got a really warm environment or if you've got more starter in there, it'll be ready to go before you may be ready for it. So I'm looking to pour 113 grams in here. And that's too much. I'm at 117. So I'm just going to dump a little bit out and see where I'm at. 114, good enough. I don't care. So we're just going to put 114 grams of flour in here to match what we just put water. Again, you want it to be a little bit over, just because you don't, when you put this in your recipe tomorrow, you are not really going to be able to get every single little bit out of this jar into the recipe. So it's okay to make a few grams extra. So we're looking for 114. I'm at 111. Okay, I'm at 116. So since this is not touching water starter, I'm just going to grab a little bit out of the top. We're at 114 right now. So let's get this mixed up. And be a little more careful with this one than I was the other one, so I don't spill any of this. And when you're making this, you can add, after you've added your little bit of starter, you can add the water and you can mix it up and then add the flour after you've mixed it. That is perfectly fine if you want to break your starter up. Usually, like I said, I'm not about perfection here or trying to make it, honestly, more complicated, I guess. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's easier to break the stiff starter up, but this is just how I've always done it, and you just are trying to mix it up till everything looks like it's incorporated. And my starter has not been fed since, goodness, it's been over a week. I think I made my starter last Tuesday, so I think it's been about a week and a half it's been in the fridge. So this will be an experiment too, to see and let you know it's okay if you don't take it out every day or take it out every week. This is still a good active starter. So you can see right now this is kind of the consistency we're at. It's not runny or anything. It's it's even thicker than, I'd say, pancake batter. So, but that is good. I'm going to clean my utensils off. All right, that is good enough. And remember, when you're cleaning off your dishes that have starter on it, do not wash like you can see my utensils have a little bit on here. I'm going to wipe that off with a paper towel first and put that in the trash. A little bit of starter down your drain won't hurt, but a little bit adds up over time and it can clog your pipes. So a word of warning, that just something to be mindful of. But this is all we're done. So we're done for tonight. It took, what, 10 minutes? Not even. It would have taken less time if I wasn't talking to y'all. But it was a quick process. Hopefully in the morning when we get back on together and we mix all our ingredients up, I'll have a good night's sleep. I'll feel better in the morning. But luckily this is the easy part. And I will catch you guys in the morning. Bye. Thanks for being here, y'all. All right, friends, welcome back to day 2 of making a couple loaves of crusty sourdough bread. So as I said, this is a 3 to 4 day process, depending on how long you want to let your fermentation rise. So last night we fed our starter. So let me go ahead and show you first. Remove this, and I have already measured out my ingredients for making all this, and I'll walk you through that process. Just makes the video a little easier. But this is our mother starter, basically, that we use for all our recipes, and this is how it rose last night. If you remember, it was kind of like a ball, and this is what the bottom looks like. You can see it's nice and airy, and if I kind of move it around in there, it's definitely stiff. So we are done using this. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the fridge because I don't plan on doing any more baking. And this is just going to live in there until I take it out the night before I'm ready to start mixing up all my ingredients. So we've got that. And this is the starter that we made yesterday or last night for the actual recipe that we're going to make today. So this is exactly, or not exactly, it's around 255 grams of starter, which is what we need. And you can see, look how beautiful that is. It's not as thick since we fed this differently. You can see it's got a very nice texture to it. It rose nicely. When it was in the jar last night, it's probably to there, so it's more than doubled. And then if we take our chopstick to it, you can just see how nice and active that is. And we, again, last night, we took the starter out of the fridge and it hadn't been used for at least a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. So there again, you don't have to feed your starter every day, especially if you're just a home baker. Your bread will turn out just as amazing. And if you're baking every day or if you're doing this commercially, I get it. You want a nice, strong starter that you can use to bake every day, and you're going to use a starter every day. So maybe having a small starter isn't for you. This is how I do it. So this is how our starter looks right now. And again, the recipe that I'm using, and I'll see if I can link this to Parker's actual recipe that you can download. I don't want to take credit for this, but I've been using Basil and Bloom's recipe and kind of tweaking the steps for it. But I've measured out, and I'm going to give you a little caveat. It takes 760 grams of bread flour, and so I like to use the King Arthur bread flour. I can buy it in big bags at BJ's with our membership. You can also, I know Walmart sells them. I think they only sell the smaller bags. So I've already measured out my flour into this bowl. You also are going to need 130 grams of whole wheat flour. And for that on hand, I had, again, the King Arthur Organic. I actually ran out. So I didn't have the full 130 grams of flour, of organic or whole wheat flour. So I had about 108 grams left in this bag, and I have no more in hand. It's not going to deter me from making my recipe, so I just added an extra 22 grams of the regular bread flour. So I want to make sure that I have enough flour in the recipe. I don't want to skimp on it in that way, because if you skimp on it, it's going to throw everything off with the water ratios and everything. So you want to make sure you at least have the right amounts measured out. And if you don't have a kitchen scale, you can convert these to cups. So I just have a cheap kitchen scale. I think they're like 20 bucks on Amazon, or you can get them at other stores. I think I got this at a thrift store a long, long time ago. So this one goes up to 11 pounds. So we are done with that. Like I said, I've already measured my flour out. In here, I have 650 grams of water measured out. In here, I've got 20 grams of salt, and that's already measured out. And the last thing that we use in this recipe is our starter. So it's really, really basic. It's even more basic with the ingredients than our sandwich loaf. So it's bread flour, whole wheat flour, water, salt, and starter. That's all we're going to use. So right now, you can see in my bowl, I've got my flours. This is, there again, both the bread flour and the whole wheat already measured. Some of the tools I'm going to use today are, I just use this as my mixer, my hand mixer. I've got my chopstick again. I've got my spatula again. And I've got a dough scraper again. Use what you have on hand. You don't have to go out and get all the fancy equipment for sourdough baking. There's scrapers that you can get at Dollar Tree for $1.25. It may be cheaper at Walmart. You can use any spatula or mixer you have on hand. You can also use just your hands for this as well. So use what you have, unless you're planning and you know you're going to be doing this over and over again. If you're not sure, you can just use what you have before you start buying anything more fancy. So I'm just kind of mixing my two flours together so it's incorporated, because I measured my whole wheat flour in here first because I knew I was not going to have enough and I wanted to get an accurate measurement on that. So that was at the bottom of the bowl. So next what we are going to do is, to our flour mixture, we are going to add our starter and some of our water, not all of it. So what I like to do first, and I did the same thing with my sandwich recipe, I like to pour some of the water, and it doesn't matter how much, you don't have to measure it out, into my starter. It'll kind of loosen things from the edges of the jar, and it'll break the starter apart and make it easier to mix into the recipe. And there's a bunch of ways you can, or steps you can take to make this loaf of bread. I have tried a bunch of different ways. Sometimes I'll just do what's called an autolaze, which is adding just your flour and and most of your water together before you add anything else. And that way it kind of helps break, I think it breaks down the gluten in the bread. And don't quote me, I really don't know why. I don't do that way anymore. So I add my starter right in the beginning. There have been times where I've added all my ingredients in at the same time. Right now, I've been leaving the salt out for about 30 minutes before I come back and do a final. I'm not sure I love that way either, so I am just experimenting still. And I've been making bread for, man, over a year and a half now. So it's always just an experiment on how you like to do it. So I like to work my bread into like a nice, like develop the gluten up front. So I like to mix it well up front instead of just kind of mixing it to a shaggy dough and doing folds and coil folds and stretching folds and all that to build the gluten. I like to do it up front better. And other people don't do it that way, which is completely fine. Again, it's trial and error to see what way you prefer to do it. So right now, I've got you can see now it looks like a liquidy, it's just looks like a liquid. All the starter is broken down in there. And according to the recipe, it says you want to leave about 30 grams of water behind. And again, I don't, because you want to be able to mix the salt in, which is why you want to leave some of the water behind. I don't measure out 30 grams. I just measure and make sure I've got some left at the end. So what I'm going to do is pour most of this in. And I find when it's not so sticky and wet, it's easier to work with. Anyway, so I've got about that much in my measuring cup here. It's not a lot at all. And then we're going to add our starter mixture in as well. Maybe I should have used my glass bowl today so you could see kind of what's going on. You can use a KitchenAid or a stand mixer if you've got it at your home. That is perfectly fine. You're going to have to do a lot less mixing by hand if you have one of those. I just prefer to do it by hand. It's kind of therapeutic for me. Okay. I'm going to pour just a teeny tiny bit in here. And this is what I talked about last night too. Remember I said make a little bit of extra because you're not going to be able to scrape down everything off the sides. So that is why we have a little bit left over. Again, wipe this out if you can into a trash can before washing it down the drain. All right, So all I'm going to do is, you can see the flour and the water are in here together. I'm just going to start by incorporating as much of this as I can together before I really get into the hand mixing. And usually I do a portion of the hand mixing in the bowl and part of it on the counter. And usually this first step, I just kind of mix it into a shaggy dough before the salt gets added. From what I've read, and I don't know the science behind it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read that if you add the salt, it changes the, I don't know the fermentation process, but it slows down the gluten process, the way it breaks down the gluten in your bread. So if you add the salt first, it can affect that, which is why a lot of bakers don't add the salt right away. Again, if you're a home baker and you want to skip that step, I'd say just go ahead and experiment. See what happens. But I'm just trying to work out all the shagginess and get, well, not work out the shagginess, but try to get as much of the dry into the wet before we let it sit and rest. It's still a little bit floury on the bottom, so I'm going to add just a teeny tiny bit to the bottom to see if I can pick up some of that additional flour that does not want to mix in. All right, this is looking a lot better. So I'm just going to scrape down my spatula. All right, let me show you all what this looks like. So you can see most of the flour is mixed in. Some of it, there's still a little bit on the bottom, which is fine. But you can see it's just kind of shaggy. Most of the flour is mixed in. It's not perfect. So I'm going to cover this. You can cover it with plastic wrap. You can cover it if you have shower caps, if it fits over your bowl. I have beeswax wraps, which I can cover with my bowl. I mean, I guess you could cover it with a tea towel as well. It's just might dry out the dough a little bit. So I'm going to let you guys go for the next 30 minutes while this just rests. I'm actually only going to let it rest for 15 minutes because let's see how it turns out. It's almost noon here. I really don't feel like doing this all day. So 15 minutes it is. I'll check in with you in 15 minutes, show you where we stand, show you the next phase with adding the salt, and we shall go from there. So the timer just went off. It's been 15 minutes. We are going to get back in and add the salt and the remaining water to this. So this is after 15 minutes what the dough looks like. Not much different than where it was. It's kind of all incorporated. So what I like to do, and again, this is just experimentation, I kind of do it differently every time, is I'm going to add about half the salt to the top and just pour half of the water over it. And then I'm just going to kind of squeeze it. So all I'm doing is just trying to work the salt in. And then I'm just going to flip it over. And there is some crusty flour at the bottom, but that's okay. I'm going to put the rest of the salt in. Put the rest of, almost all of the water. I don't always do all of the water, just in case you need it. So I just have a splash of water at the bottom. And I'm just going to kind of squeeze it on the side as well. And when you do this, it'll feel like it's breaking apart in your fingers. It'll feel like it's just kind of tearing, and you may be worried if you've never seen it or seen it act like this or do this kind of thing before. It is totally normal. But basically, we're just going to work this around, knead it around, move it around until it becomes, I like doing the window pane method, which is basically just taking a bit of your dough, and if you can stretch it out like this and it doesn't tear, you can see like a window pane, like you can almost see through the dough, then you know it's ready to move on to the next step. Obviously, this, when I just pick it up, is just tearing in my hand. This process will probably take maybe up to 10 minutes. We shall see. It is 12:09 on my clock back there right now. We'll just kind of play around and see what happens. Because I have let this rest, it's not like a big sloppy wet mess. So I'm just moving this around in my bowl to kind of help come together. Eventually, I'll get tired of holding the bowl and I'll move it to my counter, which is clean and wiped down. Make sure you've done that beforehand. You don't want remnants of whatever's on your counter to stick to your bread dough. You can see it's kind of sticky on my hands. It's not terribly bad, but it's enough to be annoying if you are doing that. Yeah, let's move it to the counter now. That way you'll be able to see it. And I'm just going to take my scraper and scrape as much as I can out of the bowl so that we can work that into the dough. All right. Actually, I'm going to keep my scraper out. So you can see it's just kind of it looks like a lumpy mess. So what I kind of do is you just want to move it around on your counter. Sometimes I massage it. Sometimes I'll take my scraper and just kind of like move it around like that. Some people, especially if your dough is a lot wetter, some people will do the slap and fold method, which actually helps to bring your dough together really quickly. It makes a lot more of, I actually do like using this method too. Look how nice and in just those few that it's starting to come together. It doesn't look like a lumpy mess. So all I'm doing and all we're doing in this stage is building the gluten in the bread. Again, if you're short on time, you can see it's kind of tearing, which may happen. But if you're short on time, you don't have to do this as long. You can just put it in the bowl, let it rest for about an hour, do a couple stretch and folds or coil folds until it starts to come together that way. I like developing my gluten more up front. I've heard that sometimes you can get a better rise and a better crumb. Again, I'm no scientist. I don't know. It's just what I've seen and I've read, and I'm happy with the consistency and the way my bread turns out. So that's why I can continue to do it. But this is looking better, so I'm going to stop beating it on the counter. I'm just going to scrape it off my hands just a little bit so it can get worked into the dough instead. And I'm going to just move this around the counter right now with my scraper. So I'm just trying to build the gluten up again. And you can do what works for you. I like using the visual clues when I'm making the bread more than I like using other tools. You don't have to make this complicated once you've done it and you know kind of how you're looking it to be. So again, this is holding its shape much better than it was, and I'll show you where it stands right now. So if we take some of the bread and we pull it up we kind of bring it out, you can see how it's still tearing. It's not like going and just pulling. So it just means that we need to keep working on building the gluten. And if your hands become sticky from this, do not add more flour. That'll change the ratios. And this is kind of why sometimes I hold back on adding all my water, because I'll just kind of dip my hand in here, and I'm not adding more water than the recipe calls for. I'm just going to keep using the water that is just a couple drops that were left over that I didn't put in. But it is looking a whole lot better now. It's not quite as sticky. And again, this is going to make 2 loaves of bread. And this is how the recipe is written. I've never tried to have it and make 1 loaf. I don't know how that would turn out. And there's a lot of people that have recipes out there, so you can go and experiment with what you find if you prefer doing it a different way. I'm just showing you how I do it and showing you that it doesn't really have to be or feel complicated. It can be scary when you're making bread for the first time. Especially sourdough can seem kind of daunting. Because it is. I mean, if you're used to never making bread, or if you're used to using yeast, the process is, or can be, a little scary when you don't know what you're looking for, but I guarantee that once you start making it yourself, it'll feel easier once you've even done it just 1 time. So I have family that has already tried the sourdough sandwich bread recipe, and she did say it was a lot easier than she expected it to be, which is exactly what we want. It doesn't need to be complicated. See how nice that's forming into a ball now? That it's kind of holding its shape already. A lot of sourdough bakers don't let it get this far. They'll just kind of put it in the bowl. But if we pull this up, it's tearing a little bit, so I'm going to do it maybe for another minute. But I think it's coming together nice enough where we don't even have to. You could just put it in your bowl and move on now. And if you don't do it long enough, it's okay, because we're going to go in and, like I said, we're going to do, I like coil folds better than stretch and folds, preferably. I do stretch and folds if I'm adding things into the dough, like the bacon and the cheddar. I like doing dry inclusions with stretch and folds. If you're doing wet inclusions, you're going to want to do that at the very, very end. And right now, see how that's not really tearing as much? I'm happy with the way that looks. That is good enough. So what I'm going to do is, we're just kind of going to gather it back up. We're going to put that in our bowl. I'm going to scrape this excess off my hands. I've got a little bit of water left in, so I didn't use 100% of the water my recipe called for. But there again, when I do my coil folds, I'm going to wet my hands with that. And maybe that's why my recipe comes out a little easier to handle, because it doesn't use 100% of the liquid the recipe calls for. It's a little bit drier, but I don't mind the way it turns out, and this is actually how I've been doing it since the beginning. So that is good enough. Here's what my dough looks like in the bowl. It's actually holding its shape already very nicely. So because of that, what I'm going to do is allow this to rest for, it says in the recipe to let it rest for 30 to 60 minutes. And then you're going to do a coil or a stretch and fold. And then you're going to do it 30 minutes apart 2 more times. Sometimes I don't even need the 3rd fold when I've worked the gluten this much in the beginning. So I am going to cover this up. I'm only going to, like I said, I don't feel like waiting all day to do all this. So I'm going to wait 30 minutes and I'm going to show you where we are and how to do a coil fold. And we'll go from there. It's been 30 minutes. The timer just went off. My countertop is cleared. When you are putting your dough on the countertop to move around and to build the gluten in it, it can leave a lot of residue. I use this metal scraper to scrape down the counter to clean it off. Just a little tip for you. But what we are going to do now is do our first fold. So you can see this is what my dough looks now. It's kind of, it actually looks pretty nice, but it's sticky still. And we are going to do what I call a coil fold. If you do a stretch and fold, you can do that for all of them. It's just basically pulling up one edge and folding it over, turning, pulling up, folding over, and you're going to do it basically all four corners. With the coil fold, what we're going to do is we're going to pick it up in the middle and the ends are going to fold under. We're going to turn the bowl, pick it up in the middle, and the ends are going to fall under. Again, you don't want to have floured hands to do this, but it's going to be too sticky to do it without anything on your hands. So again, I've got this little bit of water that I didn't use in my recipe that I'm going to just make sure my hands are wet. And again, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to fold it over and I'm going to pick it up again until it releases from that side of the bowl. I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to pick it up. See how it's just like that? I'm going to let it fold over itself like that. And now I'm going to turn and I'm going to do it the next way. I'm going to put a little bit more water. See how it's not really sticking to my hands when I'm using the water. So this should release a lot easier. I'm going to do it that way and that way. So it just folds up on itself so you can see what that coil fold did. And I am just going to basically cover this back up for another 30 minutes and we'll check to see if we need to do even another coil fold. It's been 30 minutes again, so we are uncovering this to take a look at the dough and to see what we need to do as far as another coil fold. So you can see that it is actually keeping its shape fairly nicely, but it is kind of moving around in the bowl when I push it over. So we are going to do another coil fold. Same as last time, I'm going to get my hands wet. And then I'm just going to pull up, let that end fall under. I'm going to pull up and let these ends fall under so you can see in there. I'm going to rotate it to the side and roll it up and roll it up. So you can see it is keeping a nice shape right here. We'll set the timer for another 30 minutes. We might not need to do another coil fold if this is keeping the shape that it's in now. Alrighty, y'all, the timer went off. It's been the third 30 minutes. So I'm going to show you see how this looks right now. It looks to be like in the original shape that we left it 30 minutes ago. So you can give it another stretch and fold. If it's not looking like this, you can set it for 30 minutes and doing it again. At this point, I'm happy the way it is. So I'm going to start what is called the bulk fermentation stage, which is basically where we just let this sit for a while and it should rise, it should get kind of light and fluffy, and it's showing good signs right now. So what I'm going to do is cover this back up and I'm going to give it 2 hours on the timer and then we'll check it again. Usually during this stage I just kind of put it in my oven don't turn the oven on, but I just put it in the oven with the light on since it's typically warmer in there than it is in my house. And then I'll just kind of forget it and check on it whenever I remember. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to set the timer for 2 hours, and we'll come back and we will check to see how well it's doing then. So my dough has been in the oven with the light on for more than 2 hours. Quite honestly, because I forgot to set the timer. And then I realized I forgot to turn the oven light on to keep it warm in there. So I kept it in for a little longer. I just took it out and checked it. And let me show you how it looks, because it looks like we're ready to get this split up. So you can see that the dough is pulling away from the edges here. It's kind of domed up. And then when you touch it, it's not sticky to the point where it's sticking to my finger at all. It's just kind of leaving an indent. So those are kind of some of the visual clues that you're looking for. And what I have out for tools right now, let me grab this. I like using this metal scraper for this part because I'm going to make this into 2 balls. So I like to use that. Another thing I use are, I have these silicone bannetons, I guess they're called. I don't love them, so I don't necessarily recommend them. They tend to trap moisture in there when they're in the fridge, and so it can make your dough really wet, which is why I line mine with cheesecloth. It's just what I have laying around, and I haven't bought anything else to use. This is just what I have. If you don't have any of this kind of stuff, you can absolutely like line just a mixing bowl or something with like a tea towel. Just use what you have on hand that's going to be the shape that you're interested in. So I have one that's long, and then I have this one that's round. I got these again, I think at a garage sale, which is why I bought them. They were probably a dollar or something. So, and that's when I was right in the beginning of my sourdough journey. So I've just found what works for me, and this is what I use. So what I do is, because like I said, this will create moisture being in silicone. So I take my flour, and this is the only time I ever really flour anything else now. So I just am putting it in a strainer just because I find it distributes the flour a little better. So I'm just going to flour the cheesecloth and get that out of the way. So I've been experimenting with something new. Let me move these. So I used to at this point, and you can use, people recommend that you use rice flour instead of regular flour because that flour will soak into this dough while it's in the fridge. Some people use rice flour. Again, I don't have rice flour on hand, and I'm not going to go and buy it, and this is just what has worked for me. Previously, I would flour the surface here and dump my dough out onto that. The last couple times that I have made bread, instead of flouring the surface, I have wet the surface. So I'm going to do that again today because I find that actually works a lot better, and you're not incorporating additional flour into the recipe. Plus, I still have a teeny tiny bit of water from earlier that I didn't mix in. So if it has a little bit more water in there, that's okay. So I'm using my plastic scraper for just to loosen up the edges of the bowl. And the reason I'm doing that is because this one has a curved edge and this one doesn't. So I'm just running it down the side of my bowl. You don't want to deflate what you've done because you've worked hard to get this to a certain point. So all I do is I've just gone around the entire bowl, and now before I do that, I'm not going to take my own advice. This is just water, and I said I'm just going to turn this out onto a watered surface. And I'm going to help ease it out, taking care to be fairly gentle. Just help on the edges. There we go. So the bowl is fairly clean. Let me get that out of the way. We're done with this scraper now. So this needs to go in and be 2 loaves. You can go ahead and measure it if you'd like to have equal loaves. I just eyeball it because it's just easier that way for me. So what we are going to do next is just pre-shape our dough, meaning we are just trying to ease it and spray your hands or get them wet. It's easier. And to pre-shape your loaves, I like to just take my metal scraper and kind of scoot it around and bring it forward. And this creates some surface tension. So this is just what they say, pre-shaping. And we're just trying to get it kind of into a round bowl. That's good enough. So we're going to do, let me move this one kind of out of the way and show you this one is just not shaped yet. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just kind of trying to ease it around. And I'm not really touching it. I'm just kind of helping guide it and push it under itself. So you can see these two are now pre-shaped. So before we do the final shaping and put them into the bannetons, we are going to wait an extra 30 minutes is what we're going to do. So we're going to cover this again. And so actually let me take my flour cheesecloth off for now. I'm just going to put one over there and just upside down so there's a cover on them, but nothing's actually touching them. So I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes. Then we're going to do the final shaping. We're going to put them in the bannetons. We're going to put them in the fridge, and then we're not going to touch them again until we bake them on Monday. All we're going to do now is just do the final shaping on this and put this into our bannetons. So what I like to do is take my metal scraper and just kind of loosen it from the countertop. I flip it over since that one has dried, and I just fold it in half. Fold it in half again. Pinch the sides shut. Say that 10 times fast. And I'm just going to pop this right in. Make sure your seam side is facing up, because when we take this out, when we bake it, we are going to flip this over again, and so the seam will end up being on the bottom once we bake. So all I'm going to do is just fold the ends over here so it doesn't stick. I use plastic shower caps over it since they fit perfectly on there. And then once I shape my other loaf, I'm going to put both of these in the fridge. So we'll just set that out of the way. Again, you don't really, at this point, I don't even flour or use water on my surface. You could do water if you wanted to. But I'm just going to take this. I'm going to flip it over. And I might do a little water on my hands, but nowhere else. I'm gonna see. Maybe I should have. We're gonna just fold it in half because it wants to stick to the counter. Fold it in half again. Pinch all the sides shut. All right, and this is going to go into this longer one. So we're going to pick it up, put it down, seam side up. We're going to just put the ends over here. This way, the cheesecloth will kind of suck up the moisture out of there. We're going to put this up, and we're going to put this in the fridge. We're going to put it towards the back, out of the way. So like my sandwich dough, I like to let my dough sit in the fridge for about 48 hours before I bake it. I could totally bake this tomorrow morning. It would be ready. It gets gut healthier the longer it sits. So I let mine sit for 2 days, And so Monday morning, so today's Saturday, so Monday morning we'll get back on and I'll show you how to bake the bread. All right, good morning. It is Monday, 8:40. My Dutch oven's been in the oven, preheating it 475 for almost an hour now. So it is baking day, and let me show you before we start what tools I'm using today. So I just got a regular razor blade that we're going to score the bread with. I use these silicone mats. Again, I got them at a garage sale for cheap. You can use parchment paper. I've got my hot mitts and I've got a little ramekin that I'm going to use just to put ice in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lower the temperature of my oven to 450. And we're going to take the first loaf out of the fridge. So I bake each loaf separately, one after another, because I don't know that my oven rack can handle 2 Dutch ovens at the same time. So we're going to bake them back to back. Also going to get a few ice cubes. Right, we are ready to start. So let's uncover this. This has been in the fridge since Saturday, so we haven't touched this since then. Let's peel it back. You can see, you can't even really see the seam anymore on there, but it's a lot bigger than it was. Since this is my round loaf, I'm going to use my round silicone mat, place it on top, and we're going to flip it over. Peel it back and peel off the cheesecloth. All right. So let me get you, you can see how that is. It's nice shape. I've got an air bubble right there, which is fine. What we want to do is just use the razor blade to slice down the middle, kind of at an angle. One thing you want to be mindful of is don't saw it back and forth to try to cut it. Try to cut it in one smooth thing, and then you can come back and add a little more in if you need to. This way, when it goes into the oven, after it's scored, it'll allow it to rise and kind of get a better rise on it. So this is ready now to go into the Dutch oven. So I'm going to put my hot mitts on and take this out. And my Dutch oven is usually the color of my gloves here. Because it's been in the oven for about an hour, it's turned dark red. I'm going to get a facial here. Remove my ice. All right, let me take this. We're just going to lower this in. And it's okay if the silicone falls in there. We're just going to add the ice cube. That'll create some steam that'll get trapped in. We're going to put the lid on, and we're going to put this in the oven for 20 minutes with the lid on. My timer is going off, so we are going to take this out of the oven and take the lid off. Turn the timer off. And you can just remove the lid and keep the pan in if you want to. In this case, because my silicone edges are over the bread, I kind of like to tuck them in at this point. That way my whole loaf can start to brown up now. All right. So you can see it had a nice rise on it. We're going to put it back in the oven with the cover off. I like to do it for 15 minutes. If you like a darker loaf of bread, you can do it for 20 minutes. It's been 15 minutes. Let's get this out of the oven. All right. This is exactly how I like my bread. I don't like it too dark. Look at that. All right. So let's put this here. I'm going to lay that in my sink. So since we are going to bake another loaf of bread, we need to put this back in the oven. You can see the cover of my Dutch oven has lightened up. So I'm going to put this back in the oven probably for about 10 or 15 minutes till that's had a chance to darken again before we start and put in the next loaf of bread. All right. And you don't want to cut into this one right away. Kind of like the sandwich bread, it does need to set probably for about 45 minutes to an hour. So a good rule of thumb is if you're baking another bread, don't cut into this one until that one is finished. So let's go ahead and get this prepped and ready to bake our second loaf. Grab a few ice cubes. And we're just going to repeat the process. So this one is our oblong loaf. It is different. And it's funny, I find that this loaf bakes up a lot rounder and bigger than the actual round loaf. I'll show you when we're all finished, but we're going to just put the silicone. If you have parchment, you can put it on top. And we're going to just flip it over. Make sure it's on there. I'm going to pull this off. And it kind of puffed out a little over there, but that's okay. I'm going to take our razor blade and we are going to score down here. We're going to open it up just a little bit more on the side. Okay, and we can go ahead and take our Dutch oven back out of the oven. See how that lid is nice and dark again? We'll make sure that there's no cold spots when we bake this one. I don't have the perfect hot mitts for this either. It's kind of trial and error using this. So we're going to go put this in. We're going to put our ice cubes in to create some steam. Let's go ahead and put the cover back on. And again, we're going to pop this in the oven for 20 minutes with the lid on. And we are still set at 450 degrees. She's looking beautiful. Let's pop her in the oven for another 15 minutes with the lid off. Timer went off. Let's go ahead and take this last loaf out of the oven. We can turn the oven off now. Look at this beauty. She's even better than, like I said, for some reason my oblong loaf turns out better than my round loaf every time. It rises better and it looks more round. Look at her. Let's get this off. It looks yummy, huh? So we've got 2 beautiful loaves. This one has been cooling down for about an hour, so I am going to cut this open. Typically Pat does it, but he does not want to be on video. Beautiful. Still a little bit warm, so the butter will melt. Delicious as always. Let me know if you decide to try and make the bread. And happy baking.